Hi and welcome to Ask GMBN Tech. It's our weekly Q&A tech show. Any tech questions related to your mountain bike, get them in those comments. Use the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech and we'll answer your questions. Okay, over to Pedro Alvarado. Hey Doddy, here's my question. If a smaller wheel, such as 27.5, accelerates and brakes faster than the 29er, that's totally proven. And XC races consist of constant accelerations. Why do they use 29 rather than 27.5? That's a very good question. Yeah, they'll also be lighter as well in general for the same equivalent tyre, same equivalent rim. So arguably the bikes could be lighter. But you've got to think on a cross-country bike, firstly, they want to carry speed as much as possible because you think how much exertion goes into the way that they ride. Anything that can hold speed that little bit more, even if it sacrifices in other areas, might be, well, clearly is to benefit from. That's why they're using them these days. You've also got to factor in that once a few people try new things out like this and it works, the rest of them kind of have to do it because straight away, whether they like it or not, there may well be an advantage into using that. And we've seen this happen over the last few years with everyone sort of migrating, even the shorter riders on both the male and the female XCO, migrating over to the bigger 29-inch wheels. And something else to really point out is what I was trying to get to before when we talked about 29-inch wheels last was the performance traits they have. Now, we're not talking about inertia or any other stuff, and I have got some of your other comments here, which are really good, by the way. I just not got around to getting back to you. You've got to bear in mind that cross-country racing is kind of, they've got to preserve what they're doing. So no one is going to take a massive risk that's going to damage the bike. No one's going to take a massive risk that's going to hurt themselves while they're racing. So they want to make it as safe as possible, and bearing in mind that the courses are getting more and more technical all the time. Some of the cross-country stuff really is quite scary to ride even on a trail bike, let alone on a bike that light. So anything that can improve the handling or at least stabilise the handling, get the bottom bracket low, get them nice and in the bike rather than perched up on the bike with a higher centre of gravity, makes a big difference, and it clearly is making a difference because the whole field have adopted them. But just going back to those comments, so I want to pick one up. Phil Mean, there's a whole chain of these comments and they're really good actually. He says, because we don't mention anything not favourable to 29ers and we must hype them at all costs right now. Well, not strictly true, because 29ers can feel awful, especially on the budget sense. Budget 29ers, if they've got heavy wheels, they're going to feel even worse, which just accentuates your point on the inertia factor with the wheels. Of course, they're going to accelerate slower and decelerate slower. What I was trying to get to is overall handling of them, to talk about why and how and all that sort of stuff. Also, you said, I find it odd since that is the biggest difference I noticed between switching between wheel sizes. Rotational inertia is the main reason 29ers don't speed up and slow down as fast. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Of course it is. But also something you have to factor in is what people like the feel of. At the end of the day, people still pick a 29 if they like one, and they pick a 27 if they like one. Neil likes both. I really do prefer 29. That mostly comes to bike fit from my point of view, though, not the attributes of the size of wheels. Henry's kind of on the fence, although he seems to have more 29 stuff at the moment. Blake is even starting to like 29s, and he's probably the least likely person to like a 29 because the way he jumps and rides and manuals and spins and does all that stuff. He's got a 29er Strive and he absolutely loves it, which we'll ask him about that actually, because it kind of doesn't add up by all accounts. Okay, over to Drew's Enthused. What's the best way to troubleshoot an intermittent click I can only hear when riding? I feel your pain. This really is down to a process of elimination. You're going to have to work through this yourself, because clicks and creaks and groans and stuff like that can come from anywhere really on a mountain bike. You've got to think how many bearings there are, suspension, parts that move around, stuff that's subject to torque forces when you're pedaling. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. Your best bet is to head somewhere like a closed car park, somewhere that's going to be quiet so you can hear everything, and obviously with no traffic around you, and a smooth surface as well so you can actually hear everything that is going on. And you need to basically repeat this a few times in different ways. So start off just by pedaling sat in the saddle, just putting minimal torque through those pedals, just turning them over and trying to identify where there's a creak, right? And then also do the same sort of speed, the same sort of gearing, stood up out the saddle. Is it doing it when I'm sat down? Is it doing it when I'm stood up? Straight away, you can take the seat post, all that stuff out of the equation. And even your cranks, by the extra weight that you put in, it might stand out when you stand up, that's where the creaking is coming from. The next one is to run through the gears, try in each gear, the same process, out the saddle, in the saddle, try pushing up and down on the bike. You literally have to try a whole number of things to try and sort of eliminate every possible part of the bike. And basically you need to accept that it is going to take a bit of time, unless you luck out, of course. But it's likely to either come from torque, which will be drivetrain primarily. So that could be the chain rings, it could be the cranks, it could be the pedals, it could be the free hub on the rear, it could even be a rear derailleur just pulling itself around if anything's loose there. Or if you're freewheeling along and it's doing this sort of movement, then it could be something loose in the frame. It could be your headset cups in the frame, it could be your headset is not adjusted correctly, it could be suspension pivots loose. Literally, it could be anything. I'm sorry, you're going to have to just work through this, but good luck. Persevere and you will find it. Okay, over to Dave Nutter. Hey up, Dotty. What's your opinion on steel frame hardtails versus aluminium? I love them both equally, but for completely different reasons, I think. If we just take a quick look at steel and alloy, the sort of traits they have. So steel, just as a material, you're going to find generally steel frames will be slightly heavier. They can corrode a bit easier than aluminium can, just because of the nature of the material, but they can be a lot nicer to ride in different ways. So steel has a slightly springier, a slightly more alive feeling to it. It's a really nice material if you want to do sort of gravel riding or bike packing or anything where you're going to be spending extended time on a bike. It's going to be more comfortable on the whole than an aluminium version of the same frame. Aluminium, when you look at it as a material, it's very stiff, it's very light, it's very strong for how light and stiff it is. And again, that's going to suit different riders. If you're doing pump track world championships, an alloy frame is what you want. You want to transmit every bit of force into every part of that trail to get the maximum amount of speed out. But if you take that same bike onto a rattly gravel road, you're going to feel every one of those tiny little pebbles. Whereas the steel frame, the slight resilience and sort of movement you get in the material, the slight flex, it's going to feel a lot more comfortable. I'm not sure if I could pick between the two. I've had both over the time I've been riding bikes, and I do love them very much. These days, I think generally to get a really good quality of steel frame, you're going to have to spend a bit more than you would for an alloy counterpart, because alloy is very easily made these days. A lot of manufacturers offer really good alloy bikes, and of course now with bigger wheels you can get some of that feeling back. You can have a slightly flexier wheel, so you return some of that comfort to the ride. So just think, there's so many manufacturers out there that make really good value for money alloy bikes. Whereas with the steel bikes, you do still get them, but perhaps it's going to be a little bit more of a niche to get exactly what you want out of a bike. There's a few great British brands out there. Ecstatic, for example, makes some fantastic bikes, really modern geometry and stuff on them. Just one last thing actually to mention between steel and alloy. Although both can be repaired, it can be a lot harder to repair an alloy frame if you crack it, because alloy, part of the manufacturing process is they're often heat treated, something which isn't as easy to replicate, and you can actually damage them more by re-welding them afterwards. Whereas steel frames, if you are unlucky to damage one, it's going to be a lot easier to fix. So basically take that into your own hands and take it as you will, but I like them both, but for different reasons. Okay, shock-based question from Flight Time 07. Hi guys, I weigh around 90 kilos and my rear shock, an X-Fusion 02, on my brand new 2019 Scott Spark 970 is at max pressure around 300 psi. I'm getting around 40% sag and it bottoms out on most casual rides. Could the shock be faulty and what would you do to solve the problem? Right, okay, so that doesn't sound right to me for starters. I'm about 95 kilos and I don't think I've ever been over about 250 psi, except for on some particularly odd bikes that have got weird leverage ratios, of which your bike is not one. It sounds to me like the air is swapped basically, and all of the air is in one of the chambers. You get positive and negative chambers in a shock basically to help it basically track with the ground. If the air swaps in there, it can turn into a much more linear state, which it does sound like that's happened to yours. If you release the air, what happens? Try this and let me know. So release the air from your shock. Does it by any chance suck down? If so, that's what's happened. Basically, the air is basically holding it down. That is a thing you're going to need to fix, and it's a bit more than telling you how to do it, actually, to be honest. Let us know in the comments if it is, and we'll find a way to help you. If it's not, then it could be a faulty shock, but I think they're error swapped internally on that shock. So have a go at that, and we'll let you know. Okay, Amistry 20. Hi Doddy and Henry. I'm running a 3x9 SLX drivetrain with no clutch, and I'm absolutely sick of the noise coming from the chain slapping the front derailleur when riding downhill. I'm already running a chainsaw predictor. Is there any way to dampen the noise? Not a lot. The first one, and I hope you're doing this already, is make sure you're in the biggest chain ring, and you can always go up the block at the back so your chain is a bit more stretched. The more tension on the chain, the less likely it is to flap around and hit that front derailleur. Other than that, not really, because the chain is always going to deflect and run around. It's a metal cage. It's going to bash side to side and up and down. If you were to put anything like mastic tape on the inside of it, you're going to hamper the shifting performance, which is why it's there. Your next step really would be to get a clutch derailleur. That would definitely help things on the back, but you're still going to get the noise from a front derailleur. That's just a fact of how they work, and it's also why the mountain biking world has kind of quite happily adopted the one-by system. Having a single chain ring on the front with a big spread of gears on the back seems to work for many people. Granted, it's not everyone's cup of tea. We still see people doing a Cape Epic and sort of marathon races needing the gear range spread of gears for two derailleurs, from two chain rings with a derailleur on the front. So no, unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do about it. You can check you're in the right gear, and you could go for a clutch mech if you still wanted to keep the derailleur on the front. It's definitely going to help things, but there will always be some noise due to the nature of the chain moving inside that derailleur. Well, good luck. Hope it works out for you, dude. Oh, and a tubeless question now. We always get a tubeless question. This one's a biggie from Andrew Hopf. I'm having trouble seating tubeless tyres. I've got Stan's Flow rims, right, so they're tubeless ready, that's good. And this has only been an issue on the front rim. I bought the bike with a Conti Trail King 29 2.4, yeah, that's also tubeless ready. The first time I replaced the sealant and inflated using a compressor, the bead seated, and I set the tyre aside with about 40 pounds in there in case the sealant needed some pressure to do its job. After a few minutes, the bead blew right off the rim with a huge explosion of sealant everywhere. Yeah, we've all been there, unfortunately. It's pretty messy stuff sometimes. I reinstalled the tyre and didn't pump it up as high the second time, and it sealed up fine. But the tyre wobbled side to side, despite the wheel being true. I took it to a shop and they said there's nothing wrong with the wheel or the tyre, just to ride it like that. And I did for a whole season with no issue. Fast forward to yesterday when it's time for a new rubber and sealant. Now mounted a Maxxis DHF Mini N 2.3, seated it fine with compressor, pumped to 40 psi. What do you know, it blew straight off the rim again. Reinstalled it with soapy water around the bead. All right, so I think here that what I can see is there's an issue with the rim somehow. If that's done it with two different tyres, two different brand tyres, the exact same thing, it's definitely something to do with either the bead of the rim. So check your bead all the way around. Is there any chance that there's any deformation on it? Perhaps look at the join. They're often pinned and welded. I forget what it is on this particular rim. Sometimes they machine that down so it's nice and smooth. Sometimes they don't. And if they don't and there's any sort of swarf or anything left, any beading from that welding left on the inside of the hook, that's something that could potentially not be allowing the tyre to hook into place on that rim. Also, check how it's being taped up in order to make it tubeless compatible. There's a good chance that something stopping this is the fact there's been too much tape put around the rim, so there's not enough bite of the beading against the hook on the rim there, basically stopping it, or perhaps the rim tape is too wide, and also the effect of that is not allowing the bead of the tyre to get in and actually hook into the side of the rim there. Check it all the way around, because it definitely sounds to me there's a problem with the rim, and that rim is definitely tubeless compatible. You should not be having those issues. I know it's a real pain when those sort of issues do come up. They do happen time to time, like they do with other issues on a bike, but I'm confident there is an issue there with that rim. Absolute worst case scenario, you might end up getting a new rim, which would be really annoying if you had to do that, but I'm convinced you might find it there. And I also think it might be something to do with the taping on the rim. Too wide or too much of it, effectively shortening the depth of the sidewalls of those rims and stopping your tyre hooking on. Give it a try and good luck. Let us know how you get on in those comments underneath. Well, there we go. There's another weekly Ask GMBN Tech in the bag. Any questions, any comments, let us know down there. I'm going to throw you to setting up your bike for jibbing right over here. That's Christmas bike. Turned it into a bar spin monster for him with the free coaster homemade hack thing on there. And click down here if you want to learn how to keep your bike safe at home. That's all the stuff about ground anchors and insurance and CCTV and all the stuff that stops people trying to nick your lovely bike. As always, give us a huge thumbs up here at Tech. Hit the subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications. Cheers, guys.